My dear students, greetings to all of you. So today we are going to discuss something about the adrenocorticosteroids last session, wherein I'll be covering the mineralocorticosteroids in detail and the steroid antagonists. Okay, let us get into the session. So here, mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoid antagonists, and mineralocorticoid antagonists will be discussing about. Then coming to the mineralocorticoids, I'll be covering under the session under the headings like introduction, regulation of secretion, biosynthesis, mechanism of action, pharmacological actions and ADR, preparations and therapeutic uses, hypoaldosteronism, hyperaldosteronism, adrenal functional states, and fludrocortisone, which is a synthetic mineralocorticoid, which is used most often, and then steroid antagonists. So coming to the introduction, the mineralocorticoids are the corticosteroids that act on the minerals or electrolytes, particularly sodium or potassium. So we have natural compounds like aldosterone and 11-deoxycorticosterone and synthetic compound like fludrocortisone. They are secreted by zona glomerulosa of adrenal cortex. They are C21 steroids with half-life of 20 minutes. And aldosterone is the major mineralocorticoid hormone which promotes salt and water retention in the kidneys. Then coming to the regulation of secretion, unlike that of the glucocorticoids, it follows a very different pathway. So here, the rate of secretion of glucocorticoids is regulated by the variations in the blood levels of ACTH. Then, although exogenously administered ACTH increases the secretion of aldosterone, physiologically, aldosterone output is independent of ACTH. This is a very, very important point that you have to remember. Then, aldosterone secretion is mainly regulated by angiotensin II and serum potassium levels. A reduction in salt intake and a contraction of circulating blood volume are potent stimuli via the renin-angiotensin 1 and 2 pathway to aldosterone secretion. Increase in the intake of potassium stimulates aldosterone synthesis and then release also. So here you can see in this picture, whenever there is hyponatremia, the blood pressure falls. It stimulates the kidneys to secrete renin. So which this renin converts angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. And this angiotensin 1, with the help of angiotensin converting enzyme, which is secreted by the lungs, it is getting converted to angiotensin 2. This angiotensin 2 molecule is going to act on the adrenal cortex, which stimulates, which is getting stimulated, and further release of aldosterone happens. So this aldosterone, with the sodium retaining property, so there will be like blood pressure is going to get rise. Okay. Then excessive blood potassium concentration is also one of the stimulatory factor for the aldosterone secretion. So it stimulates aldosterone secretion. So further, because of which there is exaggerated potassium excretion out of the body, the blood potassium decreases. But this again acts as a negative feedback mechanism. So then cascade of events follow. So here dehydration or sodium deficiency or even hemorrhage blood loss. So there is decrease in blood volume altogether. So there is decrease in blood pressure. So juxtaglomerular cells of kidneys. So they will secrete increased renin. So angiotensinogen is getting converted to angiotensin 1 with the help of renin. And with the help of ACE enzyme, 1 is going to get converted into 2. So this angiotensin 2 will be stimulating the adrenal cortex to release aldosterone. Apart from that, there is a possibility of vasoconstriction of arterioles because of the stimulation of angiotensin 2. So this also raises blood pressure, and aldosterone, because of sodium absorption and potassium and hydrogen ions excretion, it also raises blood volume and further rises blood pressure. Okay. So here for the regulation of aldosterone secretion, there are 4 factors, major factors that are involved. Decreased blood volume or pressure. So which acts through renin angiotensin system, that is a major stimulant, that is the RAS system mediated. Then rise in blood levels of potassium. So this is decrease in blood volume or blood pressure. This is low blood sodium, that is a separate entity. And then ACTH exogenously. Okay. Then here we will see how it happens. Decreased blood volume or blood pressure, both the factors are combined here. So renin is secreted, so angiotensin 2 is secreted. Then it is going to stimulate. This is the zona glomerulosa of adrenal cortex. So synthesis of aldosterone happens. So there is sodium retention and potassium excretion, increased blood volume and blood pressure. Then another factor here is there is potassium, exaggerated concentration of potassium in the blood, which is going to stimulate the direct stimulating effect of the zona glomerulosa of adrenal cortex, which synthesizes aldosterone, and the same cascade of events follow here. Then here stress is another major factor. So here the hypothalamus releases CRH, then stimulates the anterior pituitary. So ACTH is going to get stimulated, released. So which is going to further stimulate zona glomerulosa to produce aldosterone, and the same cascade of events follow. But here, in the compensated heart failure, there is a possibility of rise in blood pressure or blood volume, because of which, as a reflex or protective phenomenon, atrial natriuretic peptide is going to get released, which inhibits further secretion of aldosterone. Otherwise, there will be further rise in BP, which is going to further damage the heart. This is a protective phenomenon, which we are going to discuss on the while we discuss about the pharmacological actions. Okay, so these four are the predominating features. This is decreased blood volume or blood pressure, increased potassium concentration in blood, and stress factor through ACTH pathway. Okay, then so here we see this is increased potassium concentration, decreased sodium concentration, decreased blood volume. So they all stimulate RAS system. So angiotensin, renin, angiotensinogen, angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2, adrenal cortex stimulation, aldosterone. So there is actions on the kidneys. So there is a possibility of retention of sodium, excretion of potassium, and retention of water. So because of which the net result is decrease in potassium concentration, increase in sodium concentration, and increase in ECF volume. So this is opposite to this. So this is going to give the feedback effect on the RAS system, that is dextrogranular apparatus. So here you can see the same thing is depicted here, whatever that we have discussed just now, but I have introduced 3 more slides to produce the same picture here. Why means, whenever you write in your final examination, rather than writing it in a paragraph like a story, if you can write down the mechanism of action like this by putting the arrows, it gives a good understanding for the examiner, and you will get good marks also. So the same thing, RAS system, that is like a decreased, dehydration, sodium deficiency, or hyponatremia, or hemorrhage, that is decrease in blood volume. Then leads to decreased blood pressure, stimulates the kidneys to produce renin. Renin in blood increases. So angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and then 1 with the help of AC enzyme, angiotensin 2 is released. Then aldosterone secretion. Then reabsorption of sodium and potassium and hydrogen ion excretion, because of which again blood pressure and blood volume rises. So here you can see this is glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis, and then medulla. These are the 3 layers of cortex. For medulla to secrete the catecholamines, the initial stimulus should be like preganglionic fibers of sympathetic nervous system stimulation. Whereas for zona fasciculata and reticularis, the initial stimulating factor should be ACTH release with the pituitary gland. Then the hormones will get released. But here for zona glomerulosa, to produce the secretion of aldosterone, the initiating factor or stimulating factor should be renin-angiotensin pathway stimulation. Okay, there is a difference between all these things. Then coming to the biosynthesis. So this is from cholesterol, pregnenolone molecule is synthesized with a side chain cleavage enzyme. Then progesterone is produced with the help of 3-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, and it is going to get converted to 11-deoxycorticosterone with the help of 21-hydroxylase. And corticosterone is produced with the help of 11-beta hydroxylation, and with the help of 18-hydroxylation, 18-hydroxycorticosterone is produced, and with 18 oxidation, aldosterone is produced. This is how aldosterone is going to get synthesized within the body. Then coming to the mechanism of action, it is similar to the glucocorticoid mechanism of action, but here the receptors involved are mineralocorticoid receptors. So the mineralocorticoids, they get bind to the mineralocorticoid responsive element, the same mechanism. But here the receptors are expressed mainly in kidney, especially distal renal tubules and collecting ducts, and also colon, salivary glands, sweat glands, and hippocampus. So these receptors bind aldosterone and hydrocortisone with equal affinity. But there is a difference between those two. Hydrocortisone, as soon as it gets bind to the mineralocorticoid receptors in the kidney, it is immediately inactivated by 11 beta HSD enzyme to receptor inactive cortisol. So it is not going to produce any much of effects. Thus, the specificity of mineralocorticoid receptors for aldosterone action on kidney is maintained with high circulating levels of glucocorticoids. Then, aldosterone, this is the main mechanism of action, circulating in the blood in the free form, which is going to enter into the cytosol, combined with aldosterone receptor. The complex is going to get transferred to the nucleus, where it gets attached to the DNA. There is a responsive element. This is complex is formed. This is going to get attached here. So stimulation of mRNA synthesis, which goes out into the cytosol again. And in the endoplasmic reticulum, the protein synthesis with the help of mRNA will happen. Okay, this is the main mechanism of action, similar to that of the glucocorticoid mechanism of action. Then coming to the pharmacological actions, it is very, very important here. Aldosterone, it is called as life-saving hormone. So here the steroid hormones are produced by the zona glomerulus of adrenal cortex. It plays an important role in regulation of blood pressure, increases reabsorption of ions and water in the kidney, and it is going to get excreted from the body as glucuronic acid conjugate. So here, why this aldosterone is called as life-saving hormone, let us see. So whenever there is a deficiency of aldosterone, what happens? There is no sodium absorption, there is no potassium excretion. So there is no sodium absorption means decreased sodium concentration in ECF. So it leads to decrease in ECF volume, decrease in blood volume. So because of which cardiac dysfunction will result, and then circulatory shock and final death of the patient will result. Similarly, increased potassium concentration will further result in cardiac toxicity, arrhythmia, ECG changes can be there, resulting in cardiac death. So that's why aldosterone is known as life-saving hormone. So mineralocorticoids. So we have natural mineralocorticoids like aldosterone and deoxycorticosterone. They have identical effects on electrolyte and water metabolism and on cardiovascular system, except that aldosterone is 30 times more potent than deoxycorticosterone. That is the only difference that we have. Then electrolyte actions on electrolyte and water metabolism. Physiologically, the major stimulators of aldosterone production are not ACTH, but angiotensin II and potassium. That's what we have discussed already. So here, the aldosterone secretion rises after consumption of foods which are rich in potassium and after vigorous exercises which releases potassium from the exercise muscle. So single dose of aldosterone promotes sodium resorption and increased excretion of potassium by the kidney, intestine, sweat, and salivary glands. Okay. So what happens here? Another mechanism is involved, that is aldosterone escape. So what is this aldosterone escape that you see? So on repeated administration of aldosterone and in patients suffering from an aldosterone producing adenoma, which is otherwise known as primary hyperaldosteronism, the subject escapes from the sodium retaining effect, but the potassium loss continues. Okay, so it escapes from the sodium retaining capacity. So it will not further reabsorb sodium, but potassium loss continues even though you administer repeatedly for a long period of time also. So that is aldosterone escape. We'll see this here. So it refers to the escape of kidney from salt retaining effects of excess administration of secretion of aldosterone, as in the case of primary hyperaldosteronism. So what happens when aldosterone level increases? There is excess retention of sodium and water. So increased aldosterone, excess retention of sodium and water, giving rise to excess ECF volume and rise in blood pressure. So because of which what happens? There is a possibility of release of secretion of atrial natriuretic peptide brain natriuretic peptide, BNP means, and CNP means C-type natriuretic peptide from the cardiac muscle. Apart from this, because of exaggerated extracellular volume, the exaggerated concentration of excess concentration of ECF volume will be thrown out because of pressure diuresis. So these two factors together, they excrete sodium and water through urine, further giving rise to decreased ECF volume. Okay, so because of which aldosterone escape, edema does not occur within the body of the patient. Okay, then aldosterone exerts similar effects on cellular sodium transport at other sites such as intestines also. So further, the aldosterone is primarily produced by the adrenal gland. Its local production by the endothelial cells and the vascular smooth muscle cells of the heart and blood vessels has also been demonstrated. Okay. The production of aldosterone by the heart is regulated by angiotensin II. Again, so we'll see that now. So net effect is on electrolyte and water metabolism, sodium metabolism, increased sodium absorption from renal tubules, and on ECF, sodium reabsorption stimulates water reabsorption, also increasing ECF volume. So because of which blood pressure rises, but potassium ions, there is increased excretion of potassium ions from renal tubules, whereas hydrogen ions, tubular secretion will be exaggerated to maintain acid-base balance. Then coming to the cardiovascular effects. Along with angiotensin II, aldosterone also plays a role in blood coagulation and also in contraction of systemic arterioles and in stimulating thirst, because of which they are also involved in regulating inflammatory and reparative processes that follow tissue injury. So the excess of aldosterone in congestive heart failure, which is otherwise known as secondary hyperaldosteronism, because it is not connected to the adrenal gland. That's why it is known as secondary hyperaldosteronism, can cause widespread damage. Let us see how it happens. In the initial stages of left ventricular dysfunction, the patients have compensated heart failure with natriuresis due to the natriuretic peptide secreted by the cardiac atria, which we have already discussed in the mechanism. Then when moderate or severe reduction in renal perfusion happens because of worsening, that is decompensated heart failure, because further natriuresis happens, both the sodium and water will get excreted. So there is reduction in renal perfusion. So the compensated heart failure will transform into decompensated heart failure. So what happens to retain the water content, fluid, extracellular fluid content and blood flow, everything? The kidneys secrete an excess of renin with resulting excessive circulating angiotensin II and consequent hyperaldosteronism. So hyperaldosteronism secretion will be there, because of which again sodium retention and water retention will be there. This overrides the beneficial effects of the atrial natriuretic peptide. This atrial natriuretic peptide, which is secreted by the cardiac muscle, that is going to protect the heart in left ventricular dysfunction. So this protective action is lost because of the secretion of aldosterone in decompensated heart failure. So here, this point we have already discussed. Whenever there is blood volume increase, so to protect the already compensated heart in heart failure, atrial natriuretic peptide is released from the cardiac muscle, which is going to inhibit the secretion of aldosterone. This is a protective phenomenon. Further, so what happens because of the decompensated heart failure, there is release of aldosterone. So further release, absorption of sodium and water. So with angiotensin II causing sodium reabsorption in the proximal renal tubule and aldosterone in the distal tubule, salt retention is almost complete. The combination of hyperaldosteronism and an excess amount of salt, which happens because of angiotensin II in proximal renal tubule and distal renal tubule also, that causes widespread periarterial fibrosis because of the exaggerated sodium content. So periarterial fibrosis happens in the heart, and the arterioles, including the renal arterioles, ensuring a progressive worsening of heart failure. So it goes into the decompensated heart failure. This can be prevented by the aldosterone antagonist, that is spironolactone, in doses as small as 25 mg per day. So here what happens? So this is beneficial response, that is the cardiac muscle regulating the atrial natriuretic peptide. So blood pressure is decreased because of vasodilation, sympathetic tone is decreased, aldosterone synthesis is less, so natriuresis, diuresis, and anti-fibrotic effect. This is a protective phenomenon. But here what happens? So in the damaged heart, this is damaged heart. So this protection will be lost over a period of time. So RAS system is stimulated, so resulting in aldosterone synthesis, so which can give rise to the effects like vasoconstriction, rise in blood pressure, sympathetic tone is raised, and aldosterone secretion because of a sodium retention and fibrosis. So this is further, it's going to get converted into decompensated heart failure. Compensation is not there here, see, imbalance is there. Then, so here RAS system activation, water and salt retention. So adverse ventricular remodeling, worsening of heart failure symptoms and progression. Mortality is a possibility. So here we have to break it. So inhibition of the RAS system is needed. So RAS inhibitors therapy is needed. So whenever we use like spironolactone administration, then potassium concentration will be, it is not excreted out because spironolactone is a potassium sparing diuretic. So excessive concentration of potassium concentration in the body will be there. So we need to manage the hyperkalemia also. Then only we can improve the outcome in the heart failure. So mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists are not uptitrated, reduced, or withdrawn even after a single episode of elevated potassium. Or else we need to manage the hyperkalemia stage. Okay. So here summary role of aldosterone in heart failure. You may get it like 4 marks question. So heart failure, aldosterone secretion in the final stage, sodium retention, edema, fibrosis, so left ventricular hypertrophy, then potassium excretion, magnesium excretion, that is fibrosis, decreased norepinephrine uptake, giving rise to arrhythmia. Both hypokalemia and hyperkalemia can give rise to arrhythmia. So here decreased arterial compliance, decreased baroreceptor function, decreased norepinephrine uptake, endothelial dysfunction can be there, giving rise to ischemia of the cardiac muscle. So the net deleterious effects of aldosterone in case of cardiovascular disease are prothrombotic effects, vascular inflammation associated with injury, potassium and magnesium loss, central hypertensive effects because of aldosterone secretion, then endothelial dysfunction, ventricular arrhythmias because of hypokalemia, sodium retention, catecholamine potentiation, and then myocardial fibrosis, which is very fatal. So here we can see because of the aldosterone induced oxidative stress, blood vessels, what happens, endothelial dysfunction, vascular inflammation, vascular remodeling, and then finally resulting in perivascular fibrosis because of the excessive salt retaining capacity of the body. So it can give rise to hypertension, atherosclerosis, ischemia, and infarction. Further fibrosis happens. Then brain, because of the oxidative stress, there is a possibility of vascular damage, baroreceptor dysfunction, giving rise to hypertension and stroke. And on kidneys, vascular inflammation, renal fibrosis will result. Same is the case with perivascular fibrosis and here renal fibrosis. So the net effect will be hypertension, renal failure, and heart failure. And pertaining to the heart particularly, there is a possibility of ventricular hypertrophy because it has to work hard for the decompensated state, resulting in myocardial fibrosis, ventricular remodeling, sympathomimetic activation, finally resulting into heart failure, sudden cardiac death. So because all this happens because of the oxidative stress, all the organs are getting involved. So we can see the kidneys, brain, blood vessels, heart, everything, multiple organ damage, end organ damage, and death of the patient. So then another feature is hypertension, which is a characteristic feature of primary hyperaldosteronism. Hypertension due to excessive production of deoxycorticosterone is seen in one form of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So there are various forms also, salt repleting and salt retention type. Aldosterone is particularly devoid of glucocorticoid effects. Then coming to the ADR, these are related to the sodium retaining and potassium depleting actions, giving rise to the manifestations like weight gain, edema, hypertension, hypokalemia. Patients with Addison's disease are extremely sensitive to these effects and hence the dose of a mineralocorticoid has to be adjusted carefully. Then coming to the preparations and dose, aldosterone, it is having a half-life of 20 minutes, so very transient action, so that's why it is not used therapeutically. Then 9-alpha-fluorohydrocortisone is available as 0.1 mg tablets. It is a synthetic compound, synthetic mineralocorticoid, which is used in the dose of 0.05 to 0.3 mg daily in case of adults. The dose in patients with Addison's disease is best adjusted to maintain plasma potassium and renin levels within normal limits. Then coming to the therapeutic uses, fludrocortisone is used in the treatment of Addison's disease. So wherever there is sodium concentration is less. Salt losing, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, hyporeninemic hypoaldosteronism as in chronic kidney disease due to diabetes mellitus and other causes. Then severe postural hypotension from autonomic neuropathy of any etiology. Okay. Then coming to the hypoaldosteronism and hyperaldosteronism. We'll discuss something first about hypoaldosteronism. What happens here? So whatever the pharmacological actions that we have seen, that is deficient here. We have various types of hypoaldosteronism like congenital adrenal hypoplasia, where the gland itself is hypoplastic, so there is no further secretion of aldosterone. Then acquired diseases like Addison's disease, pseudohypoaldosteronism type 1 and 2, hyporeninemic hypoaldosteronism, aldosterone biosynthetic defects, and drug-induced hypoaldosteronism also produce hypoaldosteronism as a net effect. We'll see one by one now. Addison's disease, it is nothing but aldosterone deficiency. So here we can see the opposite actions of the pharmacological actions. Distal renal tubule is unable to conserve sodium, causing marked sodium loss with associated osmotic diuresis and a fall in plasma sodium. Water also goes out. What happens here? The extracellular fluid space becomes contracted and at the same time hypoosmolar. So because the potassium is leaving out of the body, it becomes hypoosmolar. As a result, water moves into the cells which become overhydrated. Only water will be moving. Okay. So then contraction of blood volume may also lead to azotemia and even collapse of the body. Then potassium excretion by the kidneys is impaired. So the net result can be hyperkalemia and acidosis. They add to the burden of metabolic disturbances. Then coming to the treatment of this particular Addison's disease, increased intake of salt or administration of a mineralocorticoid, which has a salt retaining property, corrects all the above abnormalities. But the muscle weakness is not going to recover, for which we need to add glucocorticoid. The addition of glucocorticoid is necessary for complete correction of circulatory instability and muscular weakness in Addison's disease. So here the next condition which can give rise to the decreased aldosterone secretion, it is hypoaldosteronism effects. So here we can see this is pseudo hypoaldosteronism. Pseudo means aldosterone must be there. That's what you have to think about. So it is a rare salt wasting disorder of infancy characterized by hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, and increased plasma renin activity, and also elevated aldosterone concentrations reflecting aldosterone resistance. So pseudo means aldosterone secretion is there, but aldosterone resistance is there, because of which there is no pharmacological actions or physiological actions of aldosterone in this condition. Then hyporeninemic hypoaldosteronism. This is because of damage to the juxtaglomerular apparatus and hence renin deficiency. So hyporeninemic. So it is most commonly seen in SLE, myeloma, amyloid, AIDS, and the use of NSAIDs also. But the most common is diabetic nephropathy. So here you can see hyporeninemic means hyperkalemia, acidosis, and mild to moderate impairment of renal function. So plasma renin activity and aldosterone are low because of hyporenin condition, and thus fail to respond to sodium depletion. Muscle weakness and cardiac arrhythmias also may occur. So treatment is with fludrocortisone and also dietary potassium restriction because hyperkalemia may result. Then primary defects in aldosterone biosynthesis. So aldosterone biosynthesis defects means enzyme deficiency. The particular enzyme that is involved in the aldosterone synthesis is aldosterone synthase. So here you can see 11 aldosterone synthase carries a multi-step reaction, wherein here you can see 11 hydroxylation of deoxycorticosterone. to corticosterone and 18 hydroxylation of corticosterone to 18 hydroxycorticosterone, and then further conversion of 18 hydroxycorticosterone to aldosterone, which involves the all these three reactions involve the utilization of aldosterone synthetase enzyme, which is deficient in such patients. So there is no production of aldosterone, so it results in hypoaldosteronemia. Then drug-induced hypoaldosteronism because of uses of the drugs like NSAID, cyclosporine, heparin, trimethoprim, and pentamidine. So here you can see various types of hypoaldosteronism and how we have to differentiate. Hyporeninemic hypoaldosteronism. So aldosterone is less, renin is less. Non-hyporeninemic hypoaldosteronism. Aldosterone is less and renin is also non-hyporeninemic. So renin is not less, normal or high it could be. Then aldosterone resistance means aldosterone is there. So it could be normal or high. And there is no interference of renin secretion also. So it could be renin secretion also could be normal or high. So don't bother about all these things. Then hyperaldosteronism. So this is again divided into primary hyperaldosteronism, otherwise known as Conn syndrome, which is because of adenoma of the adrenal cortex. So there is hypersecretion of aldosterone. So all the pharmacological actions get exaggerated here. So patient suffers from hypertension, hypokalemia, polyuria, alkalosis, periodic paralysis, and occasionally abnormal glucose tolerance. So edema is very rarely seen in these patients. Then serum sodium and total body sodium may remain within normal limits as the kidneys escape from the sodium retaining effects of aldosterone after first few days. So this point you have to mention in case of hyperaldosteronism. That is aldosterone escape phenomenon. So treatment is essentially surgical, but the potassium excretion is there. Hypokalemia may result because of the usage of this hyperaldosteronism. In such conditions, potassium excretion can be exaggerated. So to retain the potassium and to reduce the muscular weakness because of hypokalemia, we need to use the drug that is spironolactone before preparing the patient for surgery, because the ultimate treatment is surgical management. Then comes secondary hyperaldosteronism. Increased production of aldosterone in response to activation of the renin-angiotensin system, or because of decreased metabolism of aldosterone by the damaged liver. So this is secondary, means the problem is not in the adrenal cortex. Then here the problem could be with the renin-angiotensin system, exaggerated activation, or hyperaldosteronism means aldosterone concentration is too much. That means there could be decreased metabolism by the damaged liver. So it occurs in edematous patients with hepatic cirrhosis, CHF, and nephrotic syndrome. Okay. It is likely to occur after sodium depletion in response to vigorous diuretic therapy. So because of the reflex phenomenon, there is a hyperaldosteronism in such cases. So spironolactone is used to treat these patients. The features could be because of hyperaldosteronism, hypernatremia, hypokalemia, which can give rise to constipation, weakness, changes in heart rhythm, and then hypertension giving rise to headache and flushing kind of symptoms, and also metabolic alkalosis. Then diagnosis is done by measuring the levels of aldosterone and renin. That is primary hyperaldosteronism, high aldosterone. Secondary hyperaldosteronism, also high aldosterone you can see. But primary cases, because the problem is within the adrenal cortex, so low renin will be there. This is problem is somewhere else, so high renin can be there. Then treatment is by using potassium sparing diuretics, that is spironolactone, and apart from that, treat the underlying cause like heart failure and cirrhosis. And in case of Conn syndrome specifically, so we can go for surgical resection of the tumor. Then here the primary hyperaldosteronism and secondary hyperaldosteronism and pseudo hyperaldosteronism differences. Primary means this is like adrenal cortex is involved, not the RAS system. So renin is normal or low. Hyper means aldosterone is always high. This is pseudo hyperaldosteronism. So like it is not like always hyperaldosterone. It could be normal or low even. So then here regarding the renin concentration, primary, so because the problem lies in the adrenal cortex, there is normal or low renin levels. Secondary means it is like problem is with somewhere else apart from the adrenal cortex. So there is a most probably RAS system, so high renin levels can be there. Pseudo means normal or low renin levels. So here you can see the differentiating feature, that is adrenal Addison's disease, chronic adrenal insufficiency, and primary hyperaldosteronism, otherwise known as Conn's syndrome specifically, or it could be due to even bilateral adrenal hyperplasia. So here the hypo, all manifestations: primary deficiency of cortisol and aldosterone due to atrophy of adrenal cortex, diagnosis by ACT stimulation test, treatment with steroid replacement therapy for life. So you can see weakness, weight loss, and hyperpigmentation because of the deficiency. So hypotension and hyponatremia. And here primary hyperaldosteronism, excess secretion of aldosterone will be there. Here because of Conn's syndrome means it is because of adrenal tumor. So which can be, the treatment can be removal of, surgical removal of the tumor. And here for bilateral adrenal hyperplasia, you can go ahead with this potassium sparing diuretic like spironolactone, which also acts as like aldosterone antagonist specifically. Here the features are hypertension, hypokalemia, and low plasma renin levels. Then coming to the adrenal function test, the plasma levels of cortisol, 17 alpha hydroxyprogesterone, aldosterone, and the adrenal androgens are measured by immunoassays under basal conditions and during dynamic tests. So examples of such tests are short ACT stimulation test that we have discussed already in the earlier sessions. Then overnight dexamethasone suppression test. Plasma cortisol level is measured the morning after administration of 1 milligrams of dexamethasone orally in the night time at 10 p.m. So a level of less than 5 micrograms indicates normal suppression. So HPA axis is intact. Then coming to the fludrocortisone, that is a synthetic mineralocorticoid, and it is the only mineralocorticoid that is to be given orally. It has good mineralocorticoid and significant glucocorticoid activities also, and it is a long-acting molecule which is used in the management of replacement therapy in Addison's disease, which is otherwise producing aldosterone deficiency. And it is also used in the management of interstitial nephritis and autonomic neuropathy to preserve sodium and to treat hypotension. But here the high dose is used, that is 0.5 to 1 mg is used. Then coming to the last part, that is the steroid antagonist. So this is corticosteroid agonist and antagonist. Agonist means glucocorticoid agonist, that is prednisone. Mineralocorticoid agonist, fludrocortisone. Then antagonist, that means synthesis inhibitors, glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid synthesis inhibitors, that is ketoconazole. And we have other drugs also which we'll be discussing. And this is the main drug that we have depicted here. Then antagonist means receptor antagonist, particularly acting on particular selective receptors. So glucocorticoid receptor antagonist is mifepristone molecule, and mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist is spironolactone. So apart from the role of aldosterone in congestive heart failure that you will get short note, and here also the receptor agonist and antagonist, all these molecules can be asked as 4 marks question for you, short note. So glucocorticoid antagonist, let us see. So antagonists of adrenocortical agents. So we have like 2 types of classes here. One is synthesis inhibitors and another is receptor antagonists. So in synthesis inhibitors, there is a risk of precipitation of acute adrenal insufficiency because aldosterone secretion is reduced very much. So the drugs we have are aminoglutamide, metarapone, ketoconazole, and relostane. And glucocorticoid receptor antagonist, the molecule is mifepristone. So coming to the aminoglutamide, it blocks the conversion of cholesterol to pregnenolone and causes a reduction in the synthesis of all hormonally active steroids. So all the steroids like mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and adrenal androgens, everything is going to get inhibited. So it is otherwise known as drug-induced adrenalectomy. Okay, so that's why I have enlarged this A. A means all steroid production is inhibited. So this is used in the management of breast and prostate cancer, Cushing syndrome due to adrenocortical carcinoma, and then congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and administration along with cortisol and mineralocorticoid here. Then it enhances the metabolism of dexamethasone also. So here you can see aminoglutamide. So this rate limiting step or preliminary step, cholesterol to pregnenolone conversion is inhibited. So all these steps can be nullified. So mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and adrenal androgens synthesis can be inhibited. So inhibition, this is a mechanism of action of aminoglutamide. Cholesterol to pregnenolone action is inhibited. So mineralocorticoid, glucocorticoid, and androgen, adrenal androgens like sex steroids synthesis can be inhibited. Then ketoconazole. It is a potent antifungal imidazole derivative, which is hepatotoxic. The main mechanism of action is non-selective inhibitor of adrenal and gonadal steroid synthesis, same like that of aminoglutamide, but the enzyme involved here is different, 17-hydroxylase enzyme inhibition. So it inhibits cholesterol side chain cleavage and used in the treatment of Cushing syndrome. So ketoconazole, you can see here the main mechanism of action, 17-hydroxylase. This enzyme is inhibited. So further, this adrenal androgens and also glucocorticoid synthesis is also inhibited. But high doses, it can inhibit similar to the top, the aminoglutamide. This is the primary step, which can further reduce the synthesis of all the steroids which are produced by the adrenal cortex. Then metyrapone inhibits 11-hydroxylation reaction by inhibiting 11-beta-hydroxylase enzyme, interfering with cortisol and corticosterone synthesis. It is used in tests of adrenal function. So it measures the ability of pituitary gland to release ACTH in response to decreased blood cortisol levels. Okay, so it treats hypercortisolism in one sense. 4 grams per day is to be given and safe in pregnancy. M stands for motherly molecule, so safe in pregnancy. That way you can remember easily. So 11 beta hydroxylase metyrapone. So here this step is going to get inhibited. So primarily this is the step that is going to get inhibited, and this is also like corticosterone and cortisol synthesis is inhibited. Okay, then metyrapone test. What is this? Whenever we administer metyrapone, because it is an antagonist, so it obviously affects this 11 beta hydroxylase enzyme mediated reaction, suppresses the cortisol action. So in a normal person, whenever you administer metyrapone, so there is suppression of cortisol secretion within the body, which can further go back for feedback regulation. So further stimulates the pituitary gland releasing ACTH levels. So increased ACTH levels further will result in all these products like 17-hydroxypregnenolone, 17-hydroxyprogesterone, and all these molecules secretion will be released normally. So that means HPA axis is intact if these molecules are produced. If it is not intact, there is some problem within the pituitary gland, then this release of these molecules will not be there in the patient. So that is how we are going to assess it by using the metyrapone test. Then trilostane. So it affects the 3-beta-17-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase inhibitor that interferes with the synthesis of adrenal gonadal hormones. So 3-beta-17-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase enzyme is going to get inhibited. So it is also similar to aminoglutamide regarding surgical adrenalectomy used in the management of postmenopausal women with breast cancer. Okay. So 17-hydroxy trilostane. So here, 17-hydroxy steroid synthesis inhibition, that is like a progesterone and also androstenedione. So glucocorticoids as well as adrenal androgens are also going to get inhibited. Then metotane, which is an adrenocorticolytic agent, which produces selective atrophy of zona fasciculata and reticularis, but not glomerulosa. It is used in the management of, this is spelling mistake, adrenal carcinoma and causes necrosis of adrenal cortex. 12 grams per day results in reduction of tumor mass, ADRR, nausea, vomiting, somnolence, and skin rash. Then coming to the glucocorticoid receptor antagonist, only one molecule we have, that is mifepristone. So it is a type of progesterone receptor antagonist, but it inhibits glucocorticoid receptors also at high doses. So we are going to use high doses for the management of hormonal disorders here connected to the HPA axis. So it is used in the management of hypercorticism and inoperable adrenal carcinoma. So along with this, we can go ahead with the administration of mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist spironolactone to suppress the mineralocorticoid actions. Otherwise, it will get exaggerated. Okay. Then ADR, it produces like hypoadrenalism, nausea, drowsiness, abdominal and pelvic pain. Then mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists, we have like they compete with aldosterone for mineralocorticoid receptor binding site and thus decrease mineralocorticoid induced peripheral effects. So we have the molecule which is most commonly used, that is spironolactone, which is used in the management of diagnosis of aldosteronism, preparing for surgery, and then hirsutism in women, and in the treatment of Conn syndrome, and for diuresis, and in hypertension and diabetes mellitus also, and also in certain stages of gynecomastia. But this itself molecule, it also produces gynecomastia. Okay, then comes eplerenone, the aldosterone antagonist. So here we see here in this spironolactone, it specifically produces gynecomastia here. It is not used in the management of gynecomastia. It is specifically producing gynecomastia as an ADR. Here with this eplerenone, which is another aldosterone antagonist, the advantage of this molecule is there is no effect on androgen receptors, because of which the gynecomastia as an ADR is not seen with this molecule. So whenever you feel that that particular ADR is cumbersome to the patient, the benefit versus risk ratio has to be assessed, then we can go ahead with this molecule. It is more selective. And it also produces mild hyperkalemia and used in the management of hypertension. Then drospirenone is a new progestogen in a new oral contraceptive, antagonizes the effect of aldosterone with anti-androgenic properties. Okay, it also produces ADR like hyperkalemia. So the corticosteroid inhibitors and antagonists, amenaglutathamide, in a nutshell, overall, the reversible blockade of the conversion of cholesterol to pregnenolone, so production of all adrenal steroids is inhibited. Clinical use, Cushing syndrome, ovariectomized men with metastatic breast cancer. So to eliminate adrenal estrogen production. Ketoconazole at high doses, so it also acts like amenaglutathamide, that's what we have seen in the earlier slides. Reversible blockade of several steps of steroidogenesis requiring cytochrome P450 enzymes used in the management of Cushing syndrome. Then coming to the receptor antagonist, mifepristone, high dose, only high dose. That is used as glucocorticoid receptor antagonist, blockade of cytoplasmic glucocorticoid receptor. So used in the management of inoperable patients with ectopic ascites secretions or adrenal carcinoma. It is also an antiprogestin. Then this is spironolactone. It blocks the cytoplasmic mineralocorticoid receptor. So mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist. So it is used in the management of hyperaldosteronism and hirsutism in women. Okay. So here we end with our discussion of entire topic of adrenocorticosteroid hormones. Now I'm going to give you some MCQs. They sound easy, but you need to be you need to pay a little more focus to get the question. So number one, which of the following zones of the adrenal gland is correctly paired with the type of substance it secretes? So to avoid this confusion, I have given you the mnemonic, that is GFR. So adrenal medulla, corticotropin, zona fasciculata, cortisol, zona glomerulosa, androgens, then zona reticularis, catecholamines. Second question, corticosteroids are useful in the treatment of all of the following disorders except Addison's disease, allergic rhinitis, Cushing syndrome, IBD, and rheumatoid arthritis. All of the following adverse effects commonly occur with glucocorticoid therapy except, that is glaucoma, increased risk of infection, hypotension, emotional disturbances, and peripheral edema. Fourth question, osteoporosis is a major adverse effect caused by the glucocorticoids. It is due to their ability to increase excretion of calcium, inhibit absorption of calcium. There is a difference between these two, right? And stimulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, decrease production of prostaglandins, and decrease collagen synthesis. A child with severe asthma is being treated with high doses of inhaled corticosteroids. Which of the following ADR is of particular concern? So, hypoglycemia, the options we have are hypoglycemia, hirsutism, growth suppression, Cushing syndrome, and cataract formation. The diagnosis of congenital adrenal hyperplasia is confirmed in a child. This condition can be effectively treated by administering a glucocorticoid, administering an androgen antagonist, then administering ketoconazole to decrease cortisol synthesis, then removing the adrenal glands surgically, then administering adrenocorticotropic hormone. Okay. Then the seventh question, a patient with Addison's disease is being treated with hydrocortisone but is still having problems with dehydration and hyponatremia. Which of the following drugs would be best to add to the patient's therapy to have better efficacy? Dexamethasone, fludrocortisone, prednisone, and triamcinolone. The eighth question, all of the following are strategies to minimize the development of HPA axis suppression with corticosteroid therapy except alternate day administration of therapy, administration via topical or inhalation routes when possible, using the lowest dose of corticosteroid that adequately controls symptoms, administration of 2/3 of the daily dose in the morning and 1/3 in the afternoon. The ninth question, which of the following patients would most likely have suppression of the HPA axis? Common reason, and require a slow taper of corticosteroid therapy. So here you need to go back to the risk factors of steroid therapy. That is like dosage, duration, and the time of administration. A patient taking 40 mg of prednisolone daily for 7 days to treat asthma exacerbation. A patient taking 10 mg of prednisone daily for 3 months for rheumatoid arthritis. A patient using mometasone nasal spray daily for 6 months for allergic rhinitis. And a patient having an intra-articular injection of methylprednisolone for osteoarthritis. Think and then answer this question. Then the last 10th question, which of the following corticosteroids is most appropriate to administer to a woman in preterm labor to accelerate fetal lung maturation? Preterm labor. Okay, so that is options are betamethasone, fludrocortisone, hydrocortisone, and prednisone. So here we end the session. So we have finished all the 5 sessions of the adrenocorticosteroid hormones. So here I suggest you to go to the introductory first session and 2 sessions also. Don't think that it is just like introduction and majority of the physiology is involved in the first session, and the second session of course only little bit of pharmacology is involved. Until and unless you get the basic concepts that are discussed in the first session and second session of the introduction part, you will not be able to diagnose the case and what to choose, which drug to choose, when not to choose, and how much dose to be administered based upon the physiological mechanisms and pharmacological response and all these things. I advise you to go through those 2 sessions also. So please utilize your free time in the best way possible. And if you still have any queries, then you can get back to me. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vanessa.